Hey everyone, welcome to class. Today's essential questions are: what is truth? Do you have to see something to believe it? And why are people so incredibly stupid so much of the time? Let's introduce today's teachers. I am Matt Linton. For an embarrassing long period of time, I told my students that someday I wanted to travel to Chile to see Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is not in Chile.
Is it in Peru?
Yeah, it's in Peru. Okay. I had a student correct me on that. That's how I found out.
Gotcha.
I teach history.
Not geography.
That's unfortunate. I'm Ben Walter, and I can distinctly remember a time in my life when I argued with my brothers for the privilege of cleaning up the dog poop.
And I am Derek Rabbers. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had to really think hard about my son's first grade math homework, where you take a number, subtract an unknown, and you're given a number, and you have to just use really simple algebra to find the answer. And I thought like 60 seconds on it, where it should take like 2 seconds for me. But here we are.
But despite all of that, we are still the smartest guys in the classroom. Welcome to our show. All right, on this episode, we are talking about conspiracy theories. And not ones that we actually believe in, because as far as I know, we don't believe in any conspiracy theories.
I don't know if you believe in the moon or not, but...
Okay, I don't believe in any conspiracy theories that I'm aware of. But I think that we're seeing this growth in the popularity of conspiracy theories. And so we just thought it'd be fun to each kind of bring our own pet conspiracy theory to here, talk a little bit about what people believe and why, and then kind of unwrap why they shouldn't believe that anymore.
I don't think we are the ones who are going to convince anybody one way or the other.
When they listen to the podcast, actually, because we're putting this so early in the episode rotation, we will probably lose a lot of listeners pretty quickly. And they're like, how dare you? But anyway, I think it's going to be fun. Derek, you brought a conspiracy theory that you'd like to share with us today. Tell us about it.
Sure. So with the advent of the 2024 hurricane season, we had, I don't forget how many hurricanes make landfall across the United States. I want to say at least 3 or 4. There was Beryl early on, and then we had Milton and Helene were other notable ones, bringing a lot of damage. I think they're both like on the order of $1 billion disasters that hit the United States here in 2024. And I was seeing on Twitter or X a lot of I see a lot of the experts, but they're like retweeting from other people, unfortunately people within our own legislature, federal legislature, propagating this idea that the United States has the capability of directing hurricanes, like telling the hurricanes where to go. And it's just there's a lot we can talk about with this.
Before he gets into that, I just want to say that apparently we've established this trend on this show where anytime Twitter comes up, we emphasize that it is now called X, and there is a aggressive hand gesture of making the X for this audio-only medium. So just anytime that comes up, just imagine at least one of us
feel free to play along,
Xing.
Do an X yourself. Unless you're driving, then maybe don't take your hands off the wheel to do an X.
That's good advice. Do as we not say.
We only say here. It's an audio-only format.
We've established that. All right, anyway, so back to controlling the weather and why we do that.
But we don't control the weather.
Sorry.
Anyway.
Are you sure?
They control the weather. Sorry.
They control the weather, yes.
So, the National Weather Service or any other government agency does not, we'll just get this out of the way, they do not have the capability. Even in fact, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, this was so prolific that they felt compelled to put out a statement that they shared on all the social media platforms to say that we can't control the weather. And I guess we'll go down to kind of the reasons why not. The energy involved with storms like hurricanes, they, according to some quick Googling that I did before this show, they pack like 1.5 trillion watts of power. And another way of thinking of that, it was another search said it's like a nuclear weapon going off every couple of minutes.
Ooh.
That's how much power is contained within something like a hurricane. Hurricanes have, depending on what category it is, we're talking like right below 100 mile per hour sustained winds up to 159 mile per hour winds for like the minimum for a category 5. And the amount of heat that they're drawing in from the ocean is tremendous. Like they can track the ocean temperatures changing and the hurricane's just sucking up all this energy. We don't have anything to deal with that kind of energy
Yet.
So some people always ask, well, could we just like nuke a hurricane?
If you want fallout everywhere.
Like, so you're saying like, well, it has the power of a nuclear weapon. Could you just like use a nuclear weapon to disrupt it? And again, some quick searching without going into any like academic research into this would say, like Mr. Walter said, the big downside, even if you detonated enough munitions to disrupt it, which you're only adding in energy if you're detonating something. So I don't know how that would work. You'd have to do it enough to disrupt the convection, maybe make enough wind shear, because hurricanes don't like wind shear. But
a shockwave would be pretty substantial. But
actually,
this it's going to stop the wind.
If you staggered the explosions enough, maybe you could make enough wind shear to disrupt a hurricane. But that's a topic for another discussion.
Are you sure?
Even if you could, like Mr. Walter was saying, the fallout from this would be disastrous. You'd be maybe averting a $1 billion disaster, but then you would be causing untold amount of suffering. I mean, have you seen the victims of the bombings of Japan? It was horrendous. I forget, do you remember, Mr. Linton, what were the death totals for the bombings? Do you remember?
I want to say within that instant of impact, I think we're talking combined 20,000 for each one, 20 to 40,000 each. I think instantaneous. I do not have the numbers in front of me, and so if I'm wrong, another piece of evidence that I'm stupid.
The movie Oppenheimer cites something like 200,000 total in the weeks, months, years to come.
Yeah,
so.
that was more with the radiation sickness. So anyway, we don't want to be nuclearing anywhere near our shores to disrupt a storm. Secondly...
Before you move on to secondly...
Okay, go ahead.
Talking about the amount of power that a hurricane has, that just makes me hope that someday we can just build a giant turbine and just generate a whole lot of power every
just
time
real
a hurricane.
Fast.
Yeah, just anytime a hurricane comes through, woo, the grid gets a big old boost.
And that was another point that I was going to bring up. If we could, let's take devil's advocate for a second and say, yeah, we've got the technology, but if we did, we would have the capability to. I would think it'd go both ways. We could disrupt the energy of the atmosphere, but also be a lot more efficient in taking energy from the atmosphere. If you want to dissipate a hurricane, that energy's got to go somewhere. You can't just make the energy go nowhere. That'd be violating the law of conservation of energy. It's got to go somewhere. And if we could do that, like Mr. Walter was saying, we would be like, what energy crisis? We'd have energy, we'd have an energy surplus more than what we probably would know to do with right now. Actually, no, I know what we do.
Sell it to another country. Yeah.
Sell it to another country, or sell it to all the AI firms that are buying up and reactivating.
Use it for Bitcoin mining. That's what we would do. Let's be realistic here. We wouldn't do anything smart.
The only what would be good about that, it was it'd crater the value of Bitcoin, and then we wouldn't have to hear about it anymore.
So anyway, I think that's the main things I wanted to say. We could talk more about weather modification, like we could talk chemtrails, if we wanted to.
Lana Del Rey.
Cloud seeding. But did you guys want to chime in with anything else before we move on?
You touched on something right there that I was curious about. Is it more people thinking, because I heard the sentiment that we create hurricanes, but I don't know if the sentiment is more that we can control them or that stuff like cloud seeding is creating them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think there's a little bit of both, because what Derek was referencing, the legislature claiming that the government is targeting specific political areas was definitely a create and steer. But I do think that's a second layer. There are some people who say that these increase in hurricanes is a side effect of the other ways that we've been trying to manipulate weather, whether it be cloud seeding or, which is a thing, versus chemtrails, which aren't a thing.
Quick story, because I got to get this out because it's quite fascinating. A meteorologist posted a voicemail on Twitter, X, where a gentleman called in and he said, "Hey, why is it cloudy outside today when you said it was going to be clear skies?" And it's like, okay, innocent enough. Then he goes off on a chemtrails tirade, and it ends with him threatening them, basically a death threat, like threatening them with a noose if the people at the National Weather Service don't come clean about what they know about weather modification and all the other weirdness that comes with the claims behind chemtrails and that particular group of people.
Well, see, that actually just reminds me back to something I was thinking about when you were talking about official statements about how we can't control the weather. And maybe this is a future thing, but the bad part about even doing that is that it feeds those conspiracy theories like the hot water in the ocean feeds hurricanes. Because the more these government agencies deny this stuff, the more people want to say it's proof that they are.
It's a cover-up.
It's a McCarthy or a what's the name of the play? The Crucible. It's one of those scenarios where the more you deny it, the more you're guilty. I'm not sure there's a good solution for that, other than people stopping being stupid.
Okay, so speaking of people stopping being stupid, my conspiracy is one that went away and then made such a vicious return. And that is the flat Earth conspiracy theory. Now, look, gentlemen, I'm sure you're aware that, how long have smart people known that the Earth was round?
Since Greece.
Since Greece.
Yeah, in the BCs, right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Way in the BCs.
And then they realized, okay, it's a round Earth. Now, I was reading that in some parts of the world, they continue to believe that the Earth was flat much longer than that, but whatever. But that went away. And then it came back. And maybe one of the first instances of that was this myth that developed that people during the age of exploration thought the Earth was flat. And then when Columbus decided to sail west to look for China, people thought he was going to sail off the edge of the Earth, which is not true. Like, nobody thought that. But my students still think that. It's one of the things I do in teaching U.S. history is I do Columbus fact or fiction and say people in Columbus Day thought the Earth was flat, fact or fiction. And most of them say fact, because it's this idea that it perpetuated longer than that, which it didn't.
Which is a shame, because I teach them in physical science that Columbus knew that the Earth was round.
And this is why we are the smartest guys in the classroom.
That's why, yeah.
and what upsets me about people still believing that people thought the Earth was flat when Columbus sailed is because it gives Columbus way too much credit. That guy was a moron. Absolute wazzick. And the fact that he was as successful as he was,
he wasn't actually that successful.
Yeah, but he gets credited with a lot.
Yeah.
And just numpty.
Yeah. He's remembered as being successful.
Yes. Yeah. In his own time, not so much. But okay, so then this flat Earth belief just completely kind of fades from existence, and then makes a vicious resurgence in the 1970s, based on my reading, and has kind of stuck around since then. And I guess modern flat Earth conspiracy theorists believe that what the North Pole is the center of a disk-based Earth, and that the Antarctic ice shelf is the borders of our Earth, which is a flat disk.
Yeah, because you got to have the border to keep the water from running off.
Right. And also there's theories about like the Navy protecting the Antarctic coast to prevent people from going that direction, and a whole host of other things. But what I found interesting is that in my reading about it, there's really kind of two reasons people believe this. One of the most prominent ones, and one that gives Christians everywhere a bad name, is religion. Because you know what the Bible says? God made the sun stand still in the sky.
Oh, yeah. It's all the geocentric theory.
Right.
The Bible is told from a geocentric model.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this literal translation, and it seems like a lot of it stems from this whole science versus religion attitude that is prevalent among especially conservative Christians, that science is an enemy of faith, and therefore we must stand ever firmer on untenable beliefs. It's fascinating. And the other thing is, and this probably applies to other conspiracy theories as well, is that a number of them say that they believe in a flat earth because they have not been convinced that it's not. So the default position is, from what I see, the earth is flat, and you have to prove to me that it's not in order for me to change my opinion, and I haven't been proven yet.
And the proof that there is.
Well, I even read
The due process of a round earth, flat until proven round.
Well, I was reading, so then there are a number of people who tried to prove that the earth was flat using scientific methods. Like there was one involving, I think, like the Salton Sea, where they sent something across the horizon to see, because you can see the curvature of the earth. If something travels far away enough, it looks like it sinks. And they just flat denied what they were seeing with their own eyes, right? Or they had like a gyroscope that's supposed to track the rotation of the earth. Their measurements confirmed the rotation of the earth, and they said, well, there was a problem with the instrumentation. and like just test after test where they found evidence that the earth is round, they just denied their own evidence that they created themselves.
Is that textbook confirmation bias?
I guess so.
I think more literal than anything that I've ever seen in my life.
It is, and it's like an inverse of the scientific method, because in the scientific method, you try and prove something false, and if you can't prove it false, then it must be true. And in this case, they're trying to prove something true. They get that it's false and then just chuck out the evidence. So,
isn't that how science works?
That's exactly how science works. You did it. Good job.
So in the midst of my Googling on all this, I came across a 2018 YouGov opinion poll, which I don't know how reliable of a poll that actually is. But in that poll that they took, they found that 66% of millennials firmly believed that the earth is round.
Millennials, why? Part of me said, the millennials are known for their sarcasm. Maybe some of them just took it sarcastically and said, oh, yeah, the earth is flat.
I wonder how many said it's flat just for the meme.
Yeah.
Well, and to be clear, I mean, I guess that poll wasn't measuring that the other 34% said it was flat. There was just some skepticism, right? And so is that a measure of how skeptical society is? Because they'd probably deny that the earth was flat too, because that would mean standing on an absolute.
Oh, so that's speaking to the like postmodernist philosophy of our current culture?
The earth just is, man. It's got no shape.
Why do we got to assume its shape?
It's an oblique spheroid. You got to be specific.
I don't know those words.
It's the tides, man.
Maybe it's just because they all want to be like Kyrie Irving when they grow up. I don't know.
I don't know who that is.
That's because it involves sports, Ben.
Oh, that does make sense. Why I don't know this person.
That's true. One of the funnest facts that I read.
Funnest? Did you just say funnest?
Shut up.
You're the smartest guy in this classroom, and you just said funnest.
Yeah. This is
wonderful.
This is an audio medium.
English is imploding.
It's an audio medium. Sometimes you just say words to make a point, even if they're not real words.
I'm watching the English language die in front of my eyes right now.
It's been dying for a while.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's been a slow death.
Rest in power.
It's just evolving. Anyway, so there's a flat Earth society, right? That's the thing that people can be members of. There are flat earthers who believe that the flat Earth society was created by the government to discredit flat Earth theory.
So we're talking like levels of conspiracy here, where you've got the flat Earth society, and then the real flat earthers are beyond that.
Yes.
That's what you're saying?
That the flat Earth society, they say, is saying ridiculous stuff to make flat Earth theory look stupid. So that people don't believe it's true because the government doesn't want us to know that the Earth is flat. Now, the part that I cannot for the life of me understand, why would the government want us to think that the Earth was round if it was flat? What's their motive?
That's a good question. I want to know, are the other, in flat Earth theory, are the other planets flat?
Oh yeah, I was gonna.
Is Mars flat?
No, I remember seeing stuff on social media where they recognize that the other planets are spheres, but they still contest.
But Earth is flat.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they think those are all way smaller than they are.
Okay,
I saw something that they said the sun was like 20-some miles in diameter, they claim.
20 miles. Wow. That's a pretty small fusion reaction we got up there.
Oh my goodness.
But that kind of checks off or crosses off the idea that the government would want you to know it's round for space exploration or something in that regard. How do satellites work in the flat Earth
Great
theory?
question.
Does it go around the Antarctica or does it go over the top? What happens if you nuke the bottom? That's what I want to know.
If we dig far enough, do you just fall forever?
Well, the Russians dug that one tunnel.
Oh, that actually feeds into it, I think, doesn't it?
The Kola deep well.
Until the rock started behaving like plastic is the terminology they used.
Yep.
Which is a little scary to think about.
It's a little toasty.
And apparently you can, I don't know if they're real or not, but you can find supposedly audio recordings from the drill site. And you can hear the rocks moving, so it sounds like the screams of hell coming up from the pit. You can just hear the rocks shifting. Just, the cachinnations of the damned. It's not a good time.
That's a phrase. Guys, I think it's time. I got to get something off my chest here. I think it's time for a random rant. I hate small talk. That's probably my least favorite thing about being an adult is trying to be good at small talk. We think it's nice to engage with someone, even if it's with the most mundane subject, weather, sports, what we did yesterday. And certainly those things can lead to more substantial conversation. But if that is all you're talking about with other peers, what's the point of having the conversation in the first place? Conversation usually goes nowhere, communicates very little in any substance. So let's normalize deep, substantial talk What makes you excited? Share with me something that's gotten you down lately so we can commiserate together, try to get a more cerebral conversation going. A reason why many people believe in conspiracy theories, maybe this steals a little thunder, but is because they're uncomfortable with unknowns or complex interrelated systems. So do what you can to make it mean something to talk to another human being. End of rant.
I'll give that rant a B.
A minus.
Hey, I'll take it.
I will never explain why. Okay. That's not what we do here.
Speaking of complex systems, it's a great segue, I know. The conspiracy theory that I brought, which I think is more of a theory than a conspiracy, because it does not involve the government in any way.
For the record, I think this is just a meme that you found on the internet.
This is something I have heard in several places. It was brought up on another podcast.
Don't be promoting other podcasts on our podcast.
I never said a name. I did some research. I think this did start as a meme, and I want to be clear. I'm not sure anyone actually believes it. However, there are surprising layers to this. And the conspiracy theory is that rocks are really soft until they're touched, and then they start being hard. Does anyone want to unpack that before I give a deep dive into some of the reasonings behind this?
I have a couple, maybe one question. Does the density remain consistent?
That is such a good question. I could not find anything about that.
Okay, otherwise you'd be violating mass conservation if it changed density and it changed mass.
There's a couple reasonable explanations for this that I've brought you. So
I'm making air quotes for him on the reasonable thing. Okay.
In at least two places online, I saw this conspiracy first attributed to Isaac Newton. Gonna be honest, I've read a lot of Newton's Principia. He postulates about the existence of God, but nowhere did I ever read about squishy rocks.
I think that's probably a product of, like Abraham Lincoln said, don't believe everything that you read on the internet just because there's a picture of a smart guy next to it.
Right. Quote Abraham Lincoln. And so I think it was just someone trying to build cred or whatever, or start a meme. But if anyone believes this, I mean, there are some interesting things that you could use to back this up. I think this may have come from a sort of explanation of how landslides or sinkholes happen, where the rock seems to start behaving as a liquid when you get a lot of it moving.
Liquefaction was not a other accepted.
Well, they're saying liquefaction happens because rocks are actually soft. They're not solid, so they're allowed to do squishy things like be liquid.
Okay.
You could tie this in. Someone had this very in-depth explanation about how solids don't exist because everything's just atoms, and those are mostly empty space, and we can get like structures that appear more solid, but there's nothing like truly 100% rigid. So
I mean, that's the best.
So are rocks really quote unquote solid, man?
That's a really good statement, because it is somewhat true, or mostly true, that like when you break down the total volume of an object just taken up by the space of the point particles of the electrons, protons, and neutrons, most of it is like 99% empty space.
Right. So there's three, I would say, camps that I saw with this, and I'm not sure if all of them are memes or not, or how much of them are memes. But the first one is the kind of scientific, realistic approach of how rocks actually work, and that's looking at things like, well, Earth's mantle is a liquid, or it behaves like a liquid, but that's rock. So how's that work if rocks are really solid? And it also gets into the territory of what we like to call, speaking of Newton, non-Newtonian fluids.
Like oobleck.
Like oobleck. Both of you have children.
Or ketchup.
Not me, because I'm hashtag forever alone, hashtag depresso espresso. But you two have children, so I hope you
reach
both
out at
know.
the email address that we're sharing later in the podcast.
Both of you have children, so I'm guessing at some point you've seen or made oobleck with your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's for reference. Derek, do you want to tell our audience what oobleck is for people who don't know?
Corn starch and water, and it behaves like a solid when you hit it really hard, when you exert a high force on it. But if you just kind of press into it, it's allowed to be a liquid.
Right. So you can find YouTube videos of people like filling a pool with oobleck and then like running across it, or
First done by the Mythbusters, as with most things on YouTube.
right.
That's even science related
jumping
these
rope
days.
on it. I've seen someone doing a pogo stick on oobleck, which I would just never try. You're never going to get the oobleck out of that if you sink. But I guess the idea is it's a lot like oobleck, but it has a lot lower tolerance before it changes into solid from its more liquid state.
I got a question before you move on. What constitutes a rock? Because
Such a good question.
So you've been talking about rocks this whole time, which are either minerals or mixtures of minerals. Now we got like metal ore from the earth. When you refine it into a metal, is that like a ingot of iron? Is that no longer rock?
I have a question. How come every other conspiracy theory we just ridiculed, and this one Ben's trying to convince us is true?
Because I love it. It's so stupid. We haven't gotten to the stupidest part of this. I don't know. I couldn't find anything about the distinction between what are soft rocks versus the squishy rocks versus ores or anything like that. I couldn't find anything about that. That's a great loophole you could use.
I did find a picture of a rock that had been squished.
Oh.
Because somebody managed to sneak up on the rock when I wasn't paying attention.
Find that on WikiLeaks or something?
But something I like about the oobleck explanation is that it takes care of the explanation of like, well, a boulder falls down a cliff and it just doesn't like become a liquid on its way down. It actually bounces, therefore it must be solid. Well, if it's a matter of force causing it to be a solid, that works. The second camp is the more Schrodinger-esque camp.
Here we go.
Where-
Strap yourselves in, everyone.
What Schrodinger's cat is in the box, and it's either alive or dead, and you don't know until you observe it or you hear it meow. So I hear enough meowing from my students. You can stop that. But in this case, the rock is a liquid until observed, or is squishy until observed, and the act of observation changes its very nature. That's absurdity. I love it.
So we're talking about quantum mechanical effects seen on the macroscopic level.
Correct.
Where observation is physical contact with another human.
The very act of looking at it is enough pressure to make it turn.
I don't know how this applies to things like mountains in any case. Just thought I'd put that out there. And then the third option, which is my favorite, applies a kind of sentience to the rock, as if becoming solid is a defense mechanism. Where the rock is soft, but once it thinks it's threatened, it becomes solid to protect itself.
Like a porcupine.
Right.
Just think of its... Okay.
And you could argue and this is arguing if rocks can be alive now, and then you get into deep conversations about, well, matter and energy are interchangeable, so is anything that has matter and thus also has energy alive, because life is just a form of energy? That's a topic for another episode.
I kid you not. I was reading a book this like a couple months ago, and one of the claims was to consider particles as having some type of intelligence, like elementary particles having some type of intelligence.
Yeah, and that's what I'm thinking. Is this to me? This feels less like a conspiracy theory, because conspiracy theory feels like it has to have some kind of human origin. People are trying to pull the wool over. Yours seems more like a philosophical argument about the nature of science and matter.
Maybe so. And I love this sentience idea because A, it means you could sneak up on a rock, maybe. B, I just love the idea of thinking about it from the rock's perspective. And C, that means caves are just happy little families of squishy rocks trying to make baby rocks in the form of stalactites and stalagmites. And I enjoy that.
And now this conspiracy theory has a narrative hook. So we obviously think conspiracy theories are pretty fun, and who doesn't think the conspiracy theories aren't fun? But why do we think people actually believe them? Now, one of the things I read, and I think this has a certain level of sense, is the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing that correctly.
That's how I've heard it pronounced.
Which is the phenomenon whereby ignorance in a given field makes people unable to recognize their own ignorance. So if you don't know about things, then you are more likely to believe wrong things about them because you just don't know better. Is that the gist?
Yeah, we see that all the time in high school, don't we? Where as soon as students learn a little, they think they know everything. And they then make a ton of assumptions based off of that little bit of insight, maybe gifted by us, maybe gifted by a YouTube video or TikTok video, and now they have all the world's problems figured out just from a little picture without seeing the depths of actually what's below and beyond that.
Right, so they make an assumption, and then they're more likely to believe that the assumption is correct.
Yeah, and so then the little glimpse of ego that they experience leads to a ballooning of ego where suddenly they know more than everyone on that topic. And does that make you feel good about yourself? Like, I know the truth and others are gullible?
You're nodding on an audio-only format.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were going to say something else after that.
And then I think maybe that feeds into that other piece where if in surveys, if a person believes one conspiracy theory, they are infinitely more likely to believe other ones.
I've also heard that people who have a higher propensity for needing concrete answers right away, like they have a low tolerance for abstract thought, and they are impatient. Like if you take those two factors together, those also add to their chances of falling for or taking in the different conspiracies out there, because we hopefully you, our listeners, will recognize that the world is a big, complex thing with many, many different systems, many different aspects to it. And to think that just a person has a complete understanding of the whole world and all of its complexities, and going down from the physical science level of material, matter, energy, to up through the different sciences and up through the different social sciences, to think that you have that all figured out it's dumb. It's
and look, I think you hit the nail on the head here, and perhaps that's also with the accessibility of the internet not just the conspiracy theories are more able to be spread now because of the medium, but also I think people feel like they know more. And so because they feel like they know more, that makes them more susceptible to conspiracy theories that feed into their preconceived views of the world and how it functions.
Possibly. I think the internet was supposed to make things... It was supposed to make the truth easier to find, and it just made the truth indistinguishable from fiction. But I think a big part of this that we haven't hit on is just the sense of community that you can get as someone who doesn't feel like they fit into the rest of society. If you find a group that seems to have formed over an idea that no one else seems to believe in, I can see why that would be attractive, where you can have a sense of community around something that you believe that nobody else does. It's almost religious in a kind of twisted way.
No, I agree. And especially if you use the religion in the sense of that sense of belonging. I mean, I've been part of, I don't know, it's like you go to a concert of a band you like, right? And it's a bunch of other people who like the same music as you. It's a church-like experience, and I think conspiracy theories can provide that same feeling.
Community.
Yeah. So in the end, I don't believe in any conspiracy theories, largely just because I think that people are absolutely terrible at keeping secrets. And in fact, there was a study done by Dr. David Robert Grimes, who approached it from this perspective, saying, okay, so like say hypothetically, one of the conspiracy theories that we did not talk about, that the moon landing was a hoax. So he did some math on that, and he said, okay, in order for them to successfully stage a moon landing that did not happen, 411,000 people would have had to keep quiet about it. Okay? And so if 411,000 people all had to keep quiet for the rest of their lives, he estimated, based on his mathematical formula, that they could have kept it secret for 3 years and 8 months.
I want to know what formula that man
Well,
used.
what he did was he looked at conspiracy theories that were actually true. Like the syphilis, Tuskegee syphilis thing, where they
study?
Did real bad stuff, right? Like, and then how long after they did this did we find out, and then how many people? And so use ones like that where there were real conspiracies, and how long did we find out about them, and then use that as that formula. And so I don't think that anybody can keep a secret. I know I'm terrible at it. And if it's something that is so earth-shatteringly important as faking a moon landing, or that the earth is flat instead of round, if somebody knew, they would say something.
Just one too many beers, and that's all it would take for someone.
Or just a really attractive person of the opposite sex.
Hey, so
Especially if there's beer involved.
I'm going to go now. Mine's really short, so you're on deck, Mr. Walter. Be okay with not knowing something. Either just openly admit it, or just get used to saying, you know what, I don't know. It's okay not to have an answer. I'm okay saying that as a teacher, because, and I'm hoping to model that with my students, because I want them to see I can't be expected to have every pertinent piece of information in my mind. I would rather stave off answering the question and research it and give them a good, solid answer later than give them something that's half right or completely wrong in the moment. So get used to doing research and be okay with being wrong.
And I would just like to say that we've talked a lot about people being numpties this episode, and I want to remind everyone that, hey, these are people, and not all of them are stupid people. They might be misguided in different conspiracies that they believed, but I've met very few people that once I start talking to them, I think, wow, this guy's just a total moron. There's something there behind the eyes usually. And so I just want to encourage you, if you know someone who's a conspiracy theorist or something, don't just berate them. Like, talk to them, find out why they would believe this, or try and figure out what makes that conspiracy theory tick, because there's probably more there than you're actually giving it credit for. And that leads into our homework for this week, or whatever time period this is. There's no due dates here. Ask
Actually, there is. We're going to release due dates later.
Oh, okay. Due date
It will be reflected on your credit score.
to be announced. Your credit score. Okay. Ask a friend of yours what their favorite conspiracy theory is, whether or not they believe it or not. Find out their favorite conspiracy and try to figure out with them why people would believe it. I guarantee it'll be a fun conversation.
I appreciate that you ended us on a note of hope and optimism in humanity. I think that's always a good place
There is no hope here
to end.
on this flat earth of ours.
If you, dear listener, have any questions that you would like us to address on the podcast, please email them to us at our brand spanking new email address, smartestguyspod@gmail.com. You can find that written out in our show notes as well. Until next time, class dismissed.